Hello lovelies, just a quick vlog update I suppose. Let's see, I have finished editing and adding to one of the gore modules. I am now editing and adding to the second one. Once that's done, hopefully I can get back to something like my normal schedule. But I don't know. One piece of video work has stalled. Another one is at some unspecified point in the future now, so I've done all the prep that I can for that. And the other, we're only just finalising the script. So that's where I am on all that. So I should be able to get back onto a normal schedule of uploads, videos, blogs, all the rest of it within a day or two, maybe. I've got another meeting on Wednesday, so I don't know how that's going to go. So next week, almost definitely. So then I'll be back on Whitechester prep, and I'll do some sort of dev diary stuff for that, and also my Grim Dark rules for 5th edition. I'm trying to help some people out by rustling together rustling up some cash to pay some artists to do some bits and pieces for that, and I should be getting submissions from a new artist to do some stuff for the gore books. They're an enthusiast, so hopefully they grok with fullness, and their art will reflect the world well. Yeah, I don't normally script, but I'm not normally as tongue-tied as this. What else has been going on? Oh, the orc thing is still going on. I tried to clarify by saying that, well, look, the language used to describe orcs is the same kind of language as was used to describe Native Americans or whatever else. Okay. When you use words, if they always carry the connotation of every single bad context they have ever been used in, then you can't communicate, because everything is just semantic overload. Right? You couldn't say it was a dark night, because dark has had horrible connotations in the past. You couldn't say, I would like to buy some black paint, please, because black has had some negative connotations in the past. It's just absurd. There's some better comparison in that you're talking about race and species, I suppose, but when you describe Native Americans as brutal, savage monsters, they're not. They're human beings, the same as everybody else, by and large. And when you call orcs a group of savage, brutal monsters, they are. They're also fictional and not real people. It's a separate species, it's a separate being. Depending on the game world, there's different metaphysics and so on. You know, racists like to describe different ethnicities in terms of IQ, even though any possible or potential racial differentials there are swamped by environmental factors like access to education, childhood nutrition, safety and security. Things like that all have a much bigger effect on IQ than genes even possibly could, at least in terms of the human gene pool. It's just absurd. But when we're talking about fictional beings, you know, what was it? Third ed orcs would have an average IQ something like 20 lower, and look how stupid and brutal a lot of human beings are. The species that is built for combat, built for rape and conquest and violence, and has a nature that fits that, it's different, it's fictional. It's not true when it comes to black people or Asian people or Native Americans. It is true when it comes to orcs and gnolls and whatever else you care to mention, with a few story exceptions. See, a PC can always be an exception. That's the way I always view it in any game. You know, the PCs, the player characters, are the outliers. There's not a lot of people like them, so you can bend the rules and you can shift and change things in regard to them, even though the world beyond is something different. The racism of these assumptions is compounded in my mind because I've done a couple of videos on conspiracy theories, and particularly the one on the supposed Kalergi plan, continually gets comments from white supremacists who spend usually part of the comment insisting that they're not racist, they're not anti-Semitic, they're not this, they're not that, not the other, and then ending the comment by speculating about my race or accusing me of being Jewish. Not that I think that's anything bad to be accused of being, but it rather shows their hand, don't you think? So you got it from the new left, their identitarian politics, and you've got it from the alt-right and their identitarian politics, and here's me in the middle with you saying you're all a bunch of useless loonies. Identity in this sense doesn't matter. Race is meaningless, essentially, except the meaning that you give it. So you're both perpetuating racism. Well, one side has even redefined racism to the point where, according to them, white people can't be racist, which, of course, ironically is a racist statement in and of itself. And then the other side, they insist that the term racist has had all meaning removed from it, which is true up to a point. But, there are still people you can point to as being racist, and those who bang on about black IQ and round off their comments by accusing you of being Jewish, I feel pretty safe and secure calling them racist and meaning it, albeit it doesn't carry the same sting as it once did, and probably still should. For example, I got this one guy in my comments last night and this morning saying, well, how can you say the Kalergi plan isn't happening? There's mass immigration all across Europe. France is now something like, what did he say, 10%, 5 or 10% black. And this is somehow meant to be bad. I fail to follow how or why that would be bad. In any case, it's not an inherent bad thing. Like I say, colour doesn't matter, ethnicity doesn't matter, race doesn't matter. And the French culture has for a very long time been about liberté, égalité, fraternité. Plus they had colonial holdings in Africa and North Africa and elsewhere. And a lot of immigration, just like it does in the UK, comes from those former colonies. So, these are people who are already steeped in French culture to an extent, and the French language to an extent. So that just shows that even when they say, oh, it's about culture, or it isn't, it's about race, because these are people steeped in the French culture who are coming back to France. And in any case, it's not, I think he said it's 5 million... 5 million black people in France now, and they've got a population of 67 million. Thing is, France doesn't do racial surveys. They don't include race on their census data, due to having been occupied by the Nazis in the past. So they don't actually check for that data. So this guy really has no way to know. Now, 80% of the French population lives in cities. Of that 80%, about 10% are immigrants. Of that, only about 3% are non-European immigrants, and that's going to be split between African, Asian, Middle Eastern. There is just basically no way that it could be 5 million anyway, and this is quibbling over statistics misses the whole point. Okay, there's a lot of immigrants or non-white people in France.
Yeah, and so what?
What is this supposed to mean? Why is this meant to be a bad thing? How does this support the idea that there's some kind of plan as opposed to an economic and demographic necessity in first world countries due to low birth rates and the boomer bubble? How does this indicate anything other than reactive pragmatism to situations? It doesn't. And in a long roundabout way, this is why I so loathe the identitarian politics of what Americans call the New Left, though it's pretty old at this point. But this fixation upon identity, this playing up of race and so on, the constant denigration of white people all the time, feeds the alt-right narrative, feeds the far-right narrative, feeds the racists. because by and large a lot of people have taken on board the idea that I have, that a lot of decent people have, that race doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. What matters is the person. The content of their character, as gets overquoted by everyone, including people who should wash it out of their mouths. But both the New Left and the alt-right centre race and ethnicity, though they may call it by different names, in the very middle of their politics, rather than reaching across racial lines. And the constant attacks and degradations and accusations towards white people creates sympathy, or at least an opportunity for the alt-right to get their message out. And that's profoundly dangerous, and it's coming from the left. And I am just frustrated and fed up and pissed off about the whole thing, and that's probably why I'm reacting so utterly violently to this whole Orcs are racist nonsense, because it's not only illiterate, it's not only stripped of context, it's not only untrue and false, but it is also dangerous, because this kind of nonsensical fuss makes the, what should we call it, the real left look stupid by association, and creates breeding ground for the alt-right. You played yourself. Sang.